Today I'm speaking with Kate Mary. Kate, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you. I really appreciate you doing this. And you have a little bit of a different background that I've heard before, so this is a cool bio. You're an author, and not just an author, you are a prolific author of 66 books. Is that correct so far?
Yes.
60, so
yes.
Probably 66 and counting, we should guess. Books
Yeah.
And novellas, mostly apocalyptic and dystopian fiction. That's crazy cool. I want to hear about that in a second. She's the mom of 4, 2 boys and 2 girls, and she and her husband have been married for 23 years. That's very cool. Her husband is a U.S. Air Force pilot who was active duty for 11 years, and they've lived all over Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, California, Oklahoma. They're back in Ohio now. Again, she was a stay-at-home mom, but she did start writing in 2012, and she published her first book in 2014. Obviously, that's going very well. And she did grow up in a heavily evangelical and patriarchal home. She attended a non-denominational church that was similar to Southern Baptist. She attended Grace College and Theological Seminary for a couple of years. And we've got a couple other things to share for a fun fact, but I'm going to leave that to you. So tell us about yourself and some hobbies, and then we'll get started.
Okay, yeah, like you said, I'm an author. And it's funny, my biggest sellers are my zombie books. And I got very, very lucky that when I put the first one out, it was the peak popularity of The Walking Dead. So it did pretty well. And I did not expect that. I didn't have any budget for marketing or anything because I did self-publish that one, even though I have an agent and I had a 4-book deal with a publisher and everything. And that one I self-published because I was told there's no market for zombie fiction, which is not true. There is a huge market for zombie fiction and it actually does really well in the indie author and the indie book sphere. So yeah,
That's so cool.
It's something I always like to do. And, now it's turned into where we like to play that fun game of, what are we going to do if the zombie apocalypse happens now? And so, we have our little plan with our family, with my best friend and her family, who our families are very, very close, and have a whole plan, and it involves getting to the Caribbean. So
Nice.
If you're gonna survive the apocalypse, you might as well be in the Caribbean. So
yeah, they probably can't swim very well. Did you get a lot of ideas from The Walking Dead, or were they kind of already in your head?
Not a lot. Really, when it comes to it, zombie fiction is, you have the formula. It's people surviving and running and trying to start a new life. And so there's going to be a lot of similarities there, no matter what you do. But I got some start off from The Walking Dead of just like some character inspiration. And then from there, I think like over 30 zombie books now, and they all take place in the same world, different series. And there's a lot of character crossover that always makes my readers happy.
That's very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm definitely jealous. When I was a Christian, I was working on several books that I did intend to publish. And I do actually have 2 books published like from years ago, just small books, but in terms of like big books that I thought might make some big waves, I was working on them. But they were very much like Christian theology, worldview kind of prayer books.
Yeah.
And when I deconverted, I was like, I can't really publish them now. So
yeah,
it's amazing how life works. But we're so glad you're here. If you could take us back to the earliest days, what was it like growing up? And what did you hear in your family and your church about Jesus and the Bible? And then I'll just jump in with some questions.
Okay. So I probably had what I would say pretty typical, for the most part, evangelical upbringing, church 3 times a week, patriarchal. My dad was the head of the household and he was in charge. James Dobson was a big influence in my life and my childhood. Something I didn't even really know until the last few years when I started deconstructing heavily. I did the whole thing, youth group, all the events, see you at the pole, and, true love waits and all of that stuff that you're expected to do. And, at the time it was a fun, good thing because you're in a bubble, you're surrounded by everybody who believes the same thing. And that's one thing the church does a really good job of, is creating a community. But it does turn into a bubble, obviously. So you are surrounded by everybody who thinks the same thing, believes the same thing. Any questions you have, you feel stupid asking because you're like, everybody around me believes it. So, it
must be true.
Yeah,
it's amazing too how they always poison the well. Like they don't just say like, we're all doing the same thing, so it's true, but also they're the bad guys. So don't listen to them.
I mean, I definitely, even from a young age, had like questions about like, oh, what about this? But it was like, well, everybody I know can't be wrong. And so, I did all the youth group stuff, went to a Christian college because I was like, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I did missions trips through the college. I was involved in everything I could be involved in at church. And like, I was all in. I had even planned on, I went to Grace College for 1 year. I decided that I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to continue doing. I actually applied to Moody Bible Institute, and I got in. And so I was going to switch there, and then changed my mind at the last minute because I just felt like something was wrong. Now I know what was wrong, but I just, because I was like, I'm going to be a missionary, and Moody is the place to go if you're going to be a missionary.
For sure.
I went back to Grace, and and I mean, it was a great time, but it's also, I look back on it now and I'm like, oh man, I missed out on so much of being just a normal kid. But at the time I didn't know that, because I thought I'm doing the right thing. This, all those other people are evil, and how it's ridiculous to go to a school and where there's a bunch of partying, and that's all people are going to do. And so, yeah.
Well, I definitely want to ask more about Moody in a couple minutes, but can I take us back a little bit? When you were younger, at what age did you feel like you remember understanding the gospel and placing your, saving faith in Christ?
I mean, I would be, I think I, like most people, I don't remember the first time because I was so young. Because when you get it from such a young age, I mean, it's the fear of hell. Of course, you're going to be like, well, if I pray this prayer, I'm okay. But you do have times throughout the years, and I thought I was the only one because it's something never talks about. But now that I've been deconstructing and listening to other podcasts where people talk about it, like, then you have a time where you're like, oh, what if that didn't work? What if that didn't stick? Oh, I should pray it again. Oh, I should pray it again. And there's, always that, because that fear is just there, especially when you're talking about hell or the rapture. I'm one of those people who had that rapture fear where I would walk into the house and it would be so quiet and like, did everybody get raptured and I got left behind? And so I don't remember the first time. I remember multiple other times being like, oh, what if that didn't take? I better do it again. I better do it again. And I think I was probably 10 or so when I got baptized. I don't really remember much about the motivations behind it other than the fact that I'm supposed to get baptized because that's what good Christians do. And this is what I have to do to be saved. And it's going to show everybody that I'm a good Christian. And so, but I was young. And and it was over and over again. And I was definitely the pleaser kid, the good kid. I have two brothers, one older and one younger, and they were always in trouble. But I was the one who always did what I was supposed to do. And so that was what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be a good Christian, and I did it. I did it all. So
it is amazing though how much there's so much at stake. Like you really have to be sure that you're sure. And it is when you start to get into the theology to understand that there are verses that talk about people that have like a false faith, or this parable of the seeds and the sower and all that.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of verses that slice and dice it. James, faithful that works is dead. But you eventually get to a point where you're like, I'm not sure there's quite enough fruit and evidence in my life. And that whole question of like, if you were in a court of law and you were being accused of being a Christian, is there enough evidence to convict you?
Yeah.
That stuff gets to you. And could I just mention, you mentioned the rapture. Do you ever connect your interest in writing about zombies with religion? Because the rapture has a little bit, and even the end of Matthew where Jesus, when the temple, rips open and all that, the zombies come out and go all over Jerusalem. Did you ever associate your time in Christianity with that?
Not like that, but I think probably because I was one of those kids who had to watch, A Thief in the Night, really young. I mean, I swear I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and I can't even imagine now. I have kids. I can't imagine even showing a 6 or 7 year old that movie where they're going to get beheaded. And but so I was really young, and so maybe that did play into the fact that I've always liked apocalyptic stuff. And so it's funny that my parents were so protective about certain things we could watch, but that was okay to show me because I definitely had nightmares. I know my younger brother had nightmares. But yeah, I don't know if I connected that, but it could.
Yeah, it's certainly just a general apocalyptic background, even other passages in the New Testament. If it encourages you at all, the main character in A Thief in the Night, his son is named Jamin. He has deconverted. He's done an interview on this channel, so it's amazing. And same thing with cool. Chuck Swindoll's son. He's the same group. So it's pretty amazing how the tables turn. And was it John Piper's son, Abraham Piper? I haven't interviewed him yet, but he's in the same boat. It's just amazing how, it's like one generation is like, we're so sure and we're building this big empire of Christianity. Yeah. And you literally like not even one generation later, they're already asking hard questions. And it's just crazy. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see that. It's, you can only hide the bizarreness and the mythology of it for so long. But I mean, what was it like as a teenager and so forth? Like not in the public stuff with the poll and all that, but just you and God.
Obviously, I growing up in my home, I read the Bible every day and did the Bible studies, and all of my friends were Christian. Even I went to public school, but even a public, because it was a small town, so everybody, it was very conservative. So all my friends at my public school were Christians too, and it's so hard to remember now, being so like we're deep in deconstructing. But I know, like, I was so certain. I was wholeheartedly expected to grow up and marry a good Christian man, and my kids would go to church and do all the same things I did and all the youth group stuff. And I never expected to have any other beliefs, because that was 100% the truth. Like, the Bible was, the word of God. It was totally perfect. There were no contradictions. Like, it's so, and I just trusted that whatever, the pastor said, that was true. And whatever my parents said, that was true. And it's really, I don't know. I think part of me is kind of like pushed that out of my mind, because it feels icky now when I think back on it, that I know that I wasn't kind to other people in my school who weren't Christians. And I even had friends who were Catholic, and of course they're not Christians. So, right. And I was very outspoken about that, because I was taught, to be unapologetic about my beliefs. So I had to be outspoken, and I had to tell people that kind of stuff. And I think, it's something I'm still working through, like that guilt about being so arrogant and not, uncaring about people and their differences. So I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer, except that I know that I believed it all. I was wholeheartedly into it, and
I was right there with you. I definitely did that. Can I ask, with the Southern Baptist feel of your church, would you say, as you look back at your perspective on God and his character, as well as his relationship to you personally, did you feel like it was more of a context of just supreme total love and acceptance? Did you feel like he was always in your head, looking at your thoughts, judging you, or somewhere in the middle?
I think that I would say that supreme love and acceptance, because we were taught God is love and Christians love everybody. But the fact that I was always afraid to fail or to question or have a different opinion or anything would say the opposite. That I definitely had picked up on those moments when you talk about God being a vengeful God. And so I would have told you that God was love, God is all accepting, but I don't think now, looking back on it, that that's what I really thought. I thought of God as, I guess, kind of similar to my dad, where I knew he loved me, but I also knew that I had to do this, this, and this in order to stay in that love. I had to toe the line. I had to be a certain way.
It's amazing the way that our relationship with our parents in some ways can really heavily dictate our view on that. And it's pretty hard to unpack, I think, exactly where the one starts and the one ends, but it's interesting just as a psychological effort to try to figure out what things were driving us and which things were just truly straight up theology from the pastor. Did you feel like as you were growing up that relationship was getting deeper in the sense of like you were able to start to be more aware of things like God's will for your life and the sense of like drawing close to him and asking him to direct you?
Yeah, I definitely felt that going to college and as going to a Christian college and being surrounded by all other Christians. And we had chapel, I can't remember, a couple times a week, I think 2, maybe 3, and it was required. And then I also decided I was going to be a biblical studies minor. So I was taking a lot of Bible classes. And so I definitely felt, and that's one of the reasons I did one missions trip my freshman year. And then that's when kind of the reason I considered switching over to Moody Bible Institute, because I look back on it now and I was just like, I really want to travel. But at the time I was like, oh, this is something I can do. I knew missionaries. I knew other people who worked in the missions. And I was like, well, this is something I can do and I can travel. I can do this. It'll be so cool. And so Moody would be a good place to go. And, but yeah, I definitely thought like, I when you're surrounded by Christians and then you're in chapel multiple times and then church on Sundays, and it feels so overwhelming and true. And so you don't realize it's like the emotions and everything until later when you get out of it. So
yeah, for sure. And so you met your husband, you met him at college?
No. And we were in junior high.
Okay.
In
nice.
Our church youth group. We were
cool.
12 when we met, but we didn't start dating until we were 20.
Gotcha.
So,
but that's nice to have someone from that era that you've got such a good history with.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that we grew up same mindset, and we've both been able to deconstruct in our own ways and separately. But we didn't, and that's a whole other part of this. So yes, I'm very lucky that we are on the same page, because I know so many people that did not happen and that they got divorced because they just couldn't reconcile.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dig into some of that with you in a few minutes. As you were in college, I'm just curious. Did you feel like college and seminary helped your walk with God, or did it inhibit it in any way?
Oh, it definitely helps. It definitely helps. Just the chapel and the classes, and then separate Bible studies with friends. And we had, for each floor, we would have our growth groups where it was another Bible study. And, it definitely helped. I felt probably more certain than like my freshman year than ever before that was, my path. And that was where I was meant to go and do what I was. Yeah. I felt very, very, very secure in my beliefs at that point.
Yeah, that's sure. Awesome. The only reason I ask is that I'm sure you've heard this too, that some people go to seminary, and I guess it depends on what kind of seminary. There's probably some seminaries that are more going to just be more like an advanced Bible college, but there are some seminaries that do much more academic work. And I guess depending on which one you're in makes a big difference to that. But for some people, it's more like the death of their faith, just because they're hearing so much more about things like the documentary hypothesis and all the other varieties of information that they were just so sheltered from before. All of a sudden, it's like, where has this information been? And this does make a big difference, Yeah,
I know. It was because I was only a freshman, and I was definitely more basic Bible classes at that point. So who knows if I had gone longer, what would have happened differently. And again, I don't know that all Bible colleges, seminaries actually are going to be teaching all of that true stuff, because we have so many pastors who are out there preaching stuff that is totally not even biblical. So who knows what they're actually learning.
So. Yeah, I'm sure there's a wide variety there. And you and your husband, you both met as Christians. So you started your marriage and your family with the dedication to having a Christian home. Is that correct?
Yeah. Actually, when my husband asked my dad to, for permission to marry me, and my parents and his parents knew each other too. They were good friends. So when my husband asked my dad, my husband had to agree that he was going to be the spiritual leader in our household and all of that stuff, which, I mean, even looking at it back then is kind of laughable because I'm definitely the more dominant person, just because he's so laid back and nothing really bothers him that much. So it's just kind of funny that my dad thought that somehow just because we were getting married, his personality was going to change and he was going to take charge, which is just crazy. So, yeah.
That is. But it's funny, though, you'd say that there's a lot of guys that I knew, like in Bible college, where that pressure was over the top to be a spiritual leader. And for some guys, it probably was as simple as just getting a little bit of mentoring. But for a lot of guys, there was a personality difference that was pretty intense. And I think a lot of guys felt like they just weren't ever going to be up to the task. And therefore, they're already coming from the background of we're sinners. And yes, we're saved, but we're still disobeying God every day with stray thoughts or whatever. And now we're coming into this trying to be honorable men and maybe, do dating the right way. But then like almost implied in that is like, you're going to mess up even if you're like sexually pure, you're going to mess up just because you're not being a man of God and leading your family. And I heard so many stories of guys that just, some of them I think just like gave up. It's like, the hell with this. I just can't do it. And then of course, if you have any marriages where there's conflict, where the man's really trying to, and his wife is not going along with him, that's another way it blows up, obviously, but all kinds of pitfalls. And eventually I think some guys just felt like there's no way to win at this. And of course, then you see those occasional men who are really strong and masculine and, they could be the preacher if they wanted to. And it's like, wow, I'll never fill those shoes. And it's so much pressure for no reason.
Yeah. I think I'm very lucky in the fact that even though my husband and I met at church and we went to the same church, it was religion and Christianity in his house was like a lot more. It wasn't as rigid. I would say it was very, very rigid in my house. Like one of my earliest memories is my dad giving me a lecture about how I wasn't witnessing to enough of my friends because they were going to go to hell and I needed to tell them about Jesus and it was my responsibility. And I was probably like 6 or 7. And so with my husband, he never had that kind of pressure. His parents are like, you should be good. You should go to church. You should believe in God. And obviously you should be Republican. And, but they didn't have that kind of pressure. And so, so I think that really helped because when I went to college, it was, around the time of, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. Like that was a huge thing at my freshman year of college. There were so many people, Joshua Harris. Oh my God. Like he was all over the place. So many people stopped dating. They were just courting. It was unbelievable. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not waiting until I'm at the altar to kiss somebody in front of all of these people. That's crazy. So, and my husband never would have done that. So I got very, very lucky that he did not come from such a rigid background. So cool. That really helped.
Yeah, that makes a difference. And I remember the Joshua Harris days. It came out when I was in Bible college, and boy, that really was everything. I don't know if it turned my world upside down as much as some, but it definitely influenced me heavily and made me make some decisions differently. But it also, in some ways, just I think contributed to that overall shame culture. I mean, guys are already thinking thoughts that they know are. If anyone had a camera in their head, be like, man, everybody would think I'm just thinking thoughts I shouldn't be. And then you get this thing of like, okay, well, if you've done anything with one girl and then you're dating someone else now you've got this like whole list of people that are willing to testify, he kissed me when he shouldn't have. And, we weren't engaged or courting yet. And it's crazy how it works. It's so many ways that they want to control you. It really is. It's when you step back, eventually you're like, this is all just variations on the theme of systems of control.
Yeah. And it's so much guilt. Everything is just steeped in guilt. And I think, and just to jump ahead a tiny bit, like that's one of the best things about deconstructing is I don't have that guilt weighing me down all the time.
Yeah.
So
it is. It's amazing when you think about it. What was, when you look at your particular journey, I know that sometimes you can't always look back and say that at a particular time you were deconstructing because maybe there was more concrete times later that something changed. But when you do look way back, and you wonder if there were some early seeds, what would you say was the earliest seed of something that just didn't seem right?
I think the earliest thing was, I know I was a kid, I was young. I always had the question of, well, in order to be saved, you have to say these special magic words, this certain prayer. And I'm like, well, what about these people in jungles in the middle of nowhere? And like, how could a loving God send them to burn in hell for eternity when they've never even heard about Jesus? I remember asking that when I was young and getting the answer of, well, God knows what's in their heart. And then I would be like, but they didn't say the magic prayer. So, but I was just like, well, they're adults, so they must know what they're talking about. I was just a kid. What do I know? So, but that was one of those things that was easy to push away because, again, when you get older, you're like, well, everybody I know believes the same thing, so it has to be true. I lived in a small town. Everybody I knew went to church of somewhere. So it can't be wrong. And those people, those liberals you see on TV, there's just those crazy people who live over there. And that's it. And it was before social media. So you didn't get all of that. You didn't realize how much bigger the world was. The world feels very, very small when you're a kid and you live in a small town and there's no social media. So yeah. And you're indoctrinated and you live in a bubble, and it's easy to justify things even when you have questions.
With that thing about the lost that don't have the gospel, did that feel like an additional reason to try to do more missions, or how did you see your relationship to them?
Yeah, definitely. Because the idea of burning in hell was definitely a major theme in my household. It was, was brought up a lot. You're going to go to hell. Even now, my mom loves to remind us that we're doomed. So,
even still,
yeah. So,
wow.
Hell's the catalyst for everything. So you have to go and save and I have a lot of empathy for other people, which is now why I am more liberal and I want social justice, because I think that everybody deserves that empathy. It's not just the people who look like me, who believe like me. And I want everybody to have equality. And so it's not just Christians who deserve empathy and grace. And
yeah, just to rabbit trail for a second off of that, have you ever asked her about whether she'll be happy in heaven knowing that you're being tortured?
I don't talk to my mom right now. We were limited contact. We've been for a while, for a couple of years. Just basically whenever, and I don't go into deep conversations with her because I know there's no point, because when I've tried in the past, it's always been, her responses have ranged from, well, that's not just my opinion, it's a fact because the Bible says so. And well, I know I'm right because of the Bible. And so there's no wiggle room with her. And no, she's not going to be happy, because I know that's the reason she keeps saying it, because she thinks that is showing love. To show love, she has to tell me the truth. And the truth is that we are going to hell. And I just this past week, my mom had my husband come over to pick something up, and then he got a lecture because I had already set boundaries. I'm not talking about this. So she decided to go over my head and talk to my husband instead. And so this is going to be a no contact point for me. It's just something I'm still working on right now, because I have to protect my kids. And one of the big things is that my oldest is gay, and that has been a big, big issue with my mom.
I bet.
So, and I'm going to support my son and protect my son. And once he came out, it changed his personality so much. And he's so much happier that I don't know, even before he came out, we had already decided, my husband and I, that we are inclusive and all that bullshit. Sorry, can I curse on this?
Absolutely.
Okay. All of that was bullshit. And that we weren't going to listen to that stuff anymore. So, but once he came out and seeing the change in his personality is just like, how can I deny this, that he is so much happier? Anybody who knows him, even my mom, has acknowledged that he's so much happier. But then she also can turn around and say, well, something must have happened to him when he was young to make him gay.
Mm.
And so there's no talking to her. And yeah.
That is so crazy. It's so just when you really step back, I mean, like 1,000-foot, 10,000-foot view, and you're like, people are willing to ruin relationships, whether it's saying mean things like that or shunning, like the JWs often do. The thing that they're willing to do to destroy the people that we're supposed to love the most. But when you think, like, why are they doing it? It's for a mythological literary character from thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that's insane. And my mom is not, like, we're not in no contact. We just don't talk about it. But we had one conversation about it way back when, like about a year after I deconverted. She didn't want to talk about it at all. And I kind of eventually, we were just out together in a car doing a little shopping or something. And so I had a sort of a captive audience, you might say. I was like, what are you thinking? You haven't said anything about this. And you could just see the tears streaming down her face. And she didn't say much. She just said, I wish I were dead. I wish I'd never been born. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, if I had never been born, then I couldn't have given birth to you. So now that I was born, I have given birth to a son who's going to burn in hell. So I wish I was never born. So this never even started. And it's just like, and that's it. Like, that's where we've never breached it since. We just kind of act like there's no elephant in the room, but it's just, it's very sad and breaks your heart. But anyway,
it does. Yeah.
Do you feel like you've got anyone else in your either family or inner circle that sort of was able to either track with you or at least respect your journey?
I have one sister-in-law who hasn't been conservative since she was younger. And so we were able to talk now and then, but she doesn't live near me, so it makes it kind of tough. But other than that, really, all of my family and my husband's family, they are still MAGA, if not Christian. So it's really tough. It has taken a huge toll on our family. The reason we moved back to Ohio after my husband separated from active duty was to be close to family. And it was the first few years were great. We hosted Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I would have like 30 people over to our house. And then now it's just, I haven't spoken to my younger brother in a few years because he is so far right to the point where conspiracy theory stuff, and he's so hurtful. And I called him out on it, and he was just like, yeah, I'm just blocking you. And so that was it. And I expected to be really sad about it. But after I like took it in, I was just like, oh, thank God. It's such a relief to not have to walk on eggshells, because the last fight we had gotten into was because my family, we got COVID shots, and he was like, oh, if you want to make your kids infertile. And he said this in front of all of my kids, his kids, my other nieces. I was just like, you can't tell me what to do with my family in my house. That's not okay. But I was the one who was wrong. So, I mean, it was just, and my in-laws, we still have a relationship with them. I still love them. They are deeply MAGA. They are going to do their thing, and they're going to let us do our thing. So we just don't talk about it. I know my father-in-law was really mad during the election when he came over and saw our Harris signs, but we just don't talk about it. And even though I know they don't agree, they support my son and they are nice to his boyfriend. And so that's where we are with them. But it's changed my relationship with like my older brother. We still talk, and his wife, but we used to hang out all the time, and we just don't anymore and with them, it's more the MAGA thing, because they would, they were not going to acknowledge that I have any kind of, they're not going to acknowledge that I'm right about, Christianity not being like the end all and be all, but they will just, they'll just let us do our thing.
Yeah.
But with them, it's really more the MAGA thing.
It's amazing how the brutality and just the cruelty of the MAGA movement, as well as of just a lot of Christians in general, whether they would have identified with MAGA or not. But I do a lot of postmortems and stuff where I'm just like, what is, like, this is the issue and this is where we're at with it. But like, step back, what does this teach us about humanity and our tendencies, or just about my own personal journey? And one of the things I come back to over and over that's honestly a little bit sad to think about is just that our journeys are often much more lonely than we realize or are willing to admit. You have people that, gave birth to you that are willing to write you off. You have friends and family that were willing to write you off. And it's like you realize, especially when you realize that this universe is so big and, it's been around for so long that we can't even fathom it. You're like, I am literally just this heavily evolved animal that's here for a second and gone. And even in that little split second of time, the few people that are going to be with me in this journey are going to come and then go early, prematurely, because I don't agree with them on everything. And it really breaks your heart. Just thinks this is a journey. You eventually get used to it. I'm a bit of a loner and a bit of a introvert anyway, so I'm not like bemoaning at all. Some aspects of it work quite well for me, but it's still painful when you really like face it head on, where you wanted so many connections, both friendship wise and intimate wise, and it's just not going to happen. But I think you're wise to be creating the boundaries.
Yeah, and it's really hard, but I think we were kind of prepared for it, not in this way, but we had talked about, as my husband and I started deconstructing, and we didn't even know that's what we were doing at the time, because I didn't even know that was a thing. So, but we had already decided, because we both came to terms with like, oh, we're going to be inclusive, and we don't believe all of this other stuff anymore about like gay and trans people. So we were like, okay, so if anything ever happens and one of our kids comes out, and this was probably 10 years before my son came out, if the family can't handle it, we'll just cut them off, because our kids are more important. And so we'd already kind of done that and made up our minds like that we have to protect our family first. And even though it's going to be hard, we're going to do it. And so even though I've gotten most of the backlash from family, because I'm the one who posts on social media and things like that, because he just doesn't get on social media, he's said like, hey, if you need me to to stand up and say to them like that we're not going to talk about this, or we're not going to do that, I'll do it. And I'm like, I really don't care. I think for a while, everybody in the family thought it was just me and not him. And I think they're now realizing that, oh, he agrees with me. So, yeah.
That's really good. Like you started with, it's so good that you all do agree, because so many families, it's either the end of the marriage or it's at least a lot of division and walking on eggshells inside of the home. Going back to the actual reasons for your deconstruction, what were some of the things that you had to work through specifically regarding the claims of Christianity and of the Bible that eventually you obviously concluded weren't the same?
I think that, I'm 45, and I've probably only been actively deconstructing for about 3 years, but I was definitely deconstructing for a decade or more before that without even realizing it. Moving away from home for the Air Force really made a big difference, because suddenly I was surrounded by people who are different than me and living in different states, and you see different problems, especially when you're in the military. A lot of these Air Force bases and military bases in general they're built on cheap land. And so it's in very, very impoverished areas. So that, and then in the South, we lived in the South a lot after living in Ohio. And then you're like, it's a very poor area, especially living like in Oklahoma and Mississippi. And so it was a lot of like being like rethinking, because I grew up, if you're a Christian, you have to be a Republican, and Republicans don't want to support, aid for poor people. They don't want to. And I'm like, but I see these people, and it's not that they're not working. They live in an area where there's just not a lot of opportunity. And how do you get out of that? And as a reader, I've always been as a writer, I've always been a reader. So I read a lot. And so I've read a lot of historical fiction, and you're talking about historical fiction and how poverty is created. And then so like the first few years, it was just like, okay, well, we went to church every now and then we didn't. And it was easy to make excuses because my husband was a pilot and he was never home. And I had 1, 2, 3, or 4 little kids. So dragging kids to church by yourself isn't fun. And then it just got to be, I made other friends, and that opened my eyes about more things. And so I think for me, it really started when I met my best friend 17 years ago. And she was, so she is an atheist and has always been liberal. And here I was still saying I was a Christian, conservative, but we were just really got along and we respected one another. She would live in the South and send her kids to like a preschool at a Baptist church. And she'd be like, this person said this to me and I don't understand it. And so I would just explain it. Well, this is what they mean, and same with me. We were just respectful of one another, and that we had different beliefs and all of that. And so then what started to change my husband and I a lot was when her second child, she was assigned male at birth. Once Ryan started speaking, was like, I'm a girl. From the moment that she could speak and identify who she was. And so that was the big thing, I think, for us to take a step back and like look at what we were raised to believe, because we're like, we are watching this happen. This is nothing that the parents did. This is nothing that anybody said or did. This is a kid who knows who they are. And so we just watched, we supported. And I even talked to my best friend about it. And I was like, look, I don't understand. I'm not going to pretend to understand, but we are seeing what your family's going through and how hard this is and what you're doing. And we're supportive. And so when my husband and I, we didn't talk about it for a long time, but obviously we were both immediately like, okay, Ryan's a she. And then when we finally talked about it, I was like, well, what do you think about this? I think I was really hesitant because I didn't want it to be one of those things where we were going, like it was going to hurt our marriage, where I had changed my opinion and he hadn't. But I was finally like, what do you think about this? And he was like, well, it's nothing that they did. Like, we've watched this happen. And like, clearly this is something that Ryan was born with. And so I was like, okay, thank God, because I think the same thing. And so I think, it is a big thing having friends who are different than you and having just a different glimpse into the lives of people and really, listening and understanding instead of judging. And so once I was able to be like, okay, well, my friend has a trans kid, and clearly that kid was born that way. So what do I think about gay people? Because I was always told that was a choice. And my husband's joke is always like, it's ridiculous. If I go into a bar and I'm like, hey, do I want to go home with a woman or a man tonight? Then that's a choice. But he was like, I would never go into a bar and be like, oh, which one do I want to go home with? So he's like, that is not a choice for me. So how could it be a choice for them? And I'm like, yeah, that does make sense. So yeah. And I think that was like the big thing for us to start like, okay, well, what else have we always been taught that might be wrong, that might, be something that we have been misled about?
Can I ask, in that context of that, not that specific topic, but just the idea of rethinking things, did you have any sense of like fear that maybe you were being either self-deceived or deceived by the devil, or did you feel pretty confident in your moving forward in that line of thought?
Well, there's always fear, constantly. I mean, I still have those moments and where I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? And then I sit back and I'm like, okay, I'm a very logical person. I have to look at the facts. I have to look at what I'm actually seeing, what's actually happening. Because I mean, our family is so determined that Trump is saving the country. And everybody we know, I mean, all of our neighbors, we live in a very small town in Ohio. So most people we know are big Trump supporters. So, and every now and then I'm like, well, maybe I'm being deceived. And then I'm like, okay, I have to take stock of what's actually happening and then think about it logically. And then I'm like, no. So yeah, the fear, like there is, especially with that indoctrination, it's so hard to get that out of your head. Well, that's just the devil deceiving you. That is just, the devil leading you astray. That's Satan trying to fool you. And I mean, I hope it's not always in the back of my head, but I mean, it's really hard to get rid of that.
Yeah. It's interesting. You made a point that made me think for a second about something big in my journey. And that was the moment that I deconverted. I did some work for about 3 years on researching the origins of Christianity, but there was a specific hour that it all came flooding in. And literally like in 1 hour, I switched and became an atheist. And in that hour, the very first thing that I thought as I was just watching yet another YouTube video or something, thinking through a few things research-wise, my first thought was, is this possible? Is it possible that this is not real? Like, is it possible this is mythology? And literally the first objection that I came up with was sort of related to what you just said. It was, there's no way that many people, meaning thousands of years for Judaism and Christianity, there's no way that many people could have been deceived en masse for so long and nobody would have noticed it. And I immediately thought, well, we think the Buddhists and the Hindus and all these other people have been deceived, and there's millions or billions of them, and they've been around for a long time. So like, why is it impossible that we couldn't be deceived too? And it makes me think about the MAGA movement where you're looking around and you're thinking, we have millions upon millions of people in this country who can look at this in real time, look at the horrors and look at the cruelty of it, and literally be applauding it and thinking this is the best thing ever. And this is part of their Christian worldview coming out. Yeah. And you're like, you can see right around you how easily we are deceived, how easily we are duped, and how easily we are susceptible to indoctrination, brainwashing, propaganda, and the groupthink. And you think, if that can happen like in just a couple of years right in front of us on the news and in our neighborhoods, how could that not have happened at a time when there was no news and almost nobody could read? Like, of course it could have happened easily. But that was the thought process I had to go through to sort of move my journey along at that time. But anyway, I appreciate you bringing that, making that point. So what was the next journey after you came to that conclusion? What did you do to sort of keep moving in your thought process?
Honestly, I didn't do much for a while. I think I just kind of pushed all of my doubts and concerns into the back of my head. It was just, we weren't going to church regularly anyway. And then we just stopped going to church. And we both felt very, very guilty about it, where we would talk about it every now and then, like, oh, should we go to church? Or, until finally, it was quite a while before we both acknowledged, like, we just don't want to go to church anymore. And so it was a long time where I just didn't deal with it, because I was like, it's so overwhelming. I felt like I didn't even know where to start. I felt so alone because I didn't know anybody else who had deconstructed, because I wasn't really, the most I did on social media at that point was just post on Facebook for my books. And that was it. So I didn't even know anything about like this deconstruction thing. I never even heard the word. So, and then it was just as the election was getting really hot, and so Trump was in the news so often and everything, I had already known I never voted for Trump. I would never vote for Trump. But it was the first time that I was like, okay, I'm going to vote for a Democrat, because before I always felt so guilty. I voted third party because it was so hard, because I grew up, the Democrats are evil. I was literally told Democrats are evil. And so there was so much guilt and so much shame. Like, I can't vote for these, for a Democrat, but I can never vote for Trump ever. And so, but with Harris, I was like, well, obviously I'm voting for Harris. I'd already decided that, because I was like, Trump is just too much. He's too scary. This is seriously dangerous. But I was like, well, I'm going to take some time and actually look into all of these things that I've been avoiding, all of these things that I was told were the reason you have to vote Republican. And the one really big thing the biggest obstacle I had to overcome was the issue of abortion. So obviously growing up evangelical, that is a big topic in anybody's house. It was even bigger topic in my house. Before my parents were together, my mom had been engaged to somebody. She was not a Christian. She got pregnant and he convinced her to have an abortion. So their relationship obviously didn't last. My parents got married and then they became Christians. And then abortion was so politicized. She really struggles with depression, and it triggered a major depressive episode because she's hearing it on the media constantly about abortion is murder, hearing it at church, abortion is murder. So I grew up with a mom who was in and out of mental hospitals most of my life. And I now know that she would have had mental health issues regardless. But as a kid, that was always connected with the abortion issue. And so that was a really, really difficult thing to get over, because I'm like, I was always told it's murder. The Bible says all of this stuff. So taking the time to actually research the history of abortion and the actual facts behind it, what the Bible actually says, and all of that was my first thing that I had to do to get over that guilt of voting Democrat. And so once I learned a lot about it and realized how much it had been politicized and how we were just being lied to, I was like, okay. Well, I mean, I felt like a weight was lifted off of me, because abortion was such, it was a thing that controlled so much of my childhood. And so that was really, really difficult. But once I did, I felt relaxed. I felt relieved. And then I was like, okay, so what else have I been lied about? And so that was when I started watching a lot of documentaries and then looking up like books and other topics that were mentioned in the documentaries, and listening to audiobooks and then things. And then I came across the new evangelicals on Instagram and the other people who have deconstructing journeys, April of Joy and everything. And, and then I was like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person going through this. And I actually have a word for this. And it was, I had really, really felt like I was totally alone through until I found that. And so finding out that there were other people, especially, and it seems like it's so many people who are just within this like age group, that we're all like realizing how I feel like not only how much I was lied to, but how much I was manipulated and how much I missed out on as a kid. I'm watching my kids, this is off the subject, but I'm watching my kids now like going to college and parties and stuff. And I'm just like, I'm so jealous. I never did any of that. So, because I didn't want to go to hell.
It's funny on that note, even I went to a couple conservative Bible colleges, and even from the time I started to the time I left, some of the rules changed, and the people that came like when I was a junior and senior were having a lot more fun. I remember going to freshman orientation, and they were like, of course the normal rules, like, no touching each other on dates and so forth, but no cards and no movie theaters.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Literally, like by the time I was a junior or senior, those rules were like so old and outdated. And I was like, what changed around me? This is crazy. But I'd gone to a much more heavily conservative school first. It was called Bob Jones University. And then I switched to a small school that was liberal in comparison, but still conservative. But yeah, it's amazing how it changes. And it really does do your head in. But it's amazing too when you look back at it. And I have like this mixed feeling of like, I saw some kids get in some really big trouble, and it kind of keeps you on the straight and narrow. Obviously, that's the main point of it. But at the same time, I think that the thing to me is like, you don't really know what you would have done because you don't really know who you are, because it really basically not just sheltered you, it created an identity for you that was forced on you that you don't, it's like you kind of have to not just leave Christianity and say, this is mythology, this isn't real. You also have to immediately say, I don't know who the hell I am. Like, I've never been anybody but it's me in Christ. It's me in God. It's me in the Bible. It's me in church. There's no just me.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And it's frustrating because I put it off for so long that now I'm like, I'm in my 40s and I'm still like trying to figure out totally who I am. I mean, I have a great idea of who I am, but I'm still like discovering things that, it's frustrating, and it's definitely something I don't ever want to do to my kids. And I love, they are 21 and 18 and 16, and my youngest will be 15 next week. So they are, I love watching that they get to just find out who they are at the age that they're supposed to, instead of me putting them in a box and telling them that's where they have to live, because that was what I was told. I had to fit into this tiny little box to be, the right person. And I mean, me getting my belly button pierced at 18 was like this big deal. So, yeah.
It's
and
amazing.
now I'm like, I took my daughters at 14 to get belly button piercings and nose piercings. And so, yeah.
It is such an amazing gift to be able to give the next generation that, because it's like, I think a lot about the phrase, leave it better than you found it, meaning leave the planet better than you found it. Yeah. But in many ways, for those of us that have kids, that's going to be our biggest place, is to leave our kids in better shape and leave our planet in better shape. And it's such a cool gift. And it's
and I'll tell you that it works, because I grew up in a family where my dad, I mean, he read James Dobson, so he spanked and yelled and asserted his dominance. And my brothers were constantly in trouble. I was the good one who obeyed, but that was because I was a pleaser. Here I have 4 kids. They're all different personalities. I've never had to ground my kids. I've definitely never spanked them. And my mom is still always like, your kids are so great. They're so well behaved. They're so polite. And I'm like, well, because I treat them like they're people, because they are. So
can I get a witness? It's so good. That is literally, when I deconverted, that was one of the first ramifications that crossed my mind. And it was the first thing was thought autonomy, and a close second is bodily autonomy. And I'm so glad it happened early in their journey. When you were at the stage there where you were really thinking through all these topics, there's still like this arena of like, but there's, you can move between different denominations. You can move between conservative and liberal Christianity. You can be a progressive or whatever they'd call it. You can ask questions. You can even deconstruct. But there's for a lot of people, there's like an unwritten rule. Don't take this too far, because there's a pendulum swing dynamic going on. And you could end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. And therefore, a lot of people want to kind of keep you in the fold. What were the things that, it sounds like you kind of moved out of the fold, if I'm understanding your story correctly. What were the things that you had to think through at that point to say, not what are people's expectations of me, but just digging into the actual truth claims of the Bible? Like, is this actually a divine book? And even if I think there might be some flaws in it, is there still some sense in which the God of the universe is real and he gave us this book? How'd you get past all that?
Well, I'm still trying to figure it out. For a while, I was considering like maybe trying a church that was inclusive. I did find a couple in the area, but honestly, at this point, the idea of walking into a church is just so repugnant. I just. And I might always feel that way. I might not. I've had conversations with multiple people where they're like, oh, well, if you're interested in trying to figure out your reconstruction journey to figure out what you believe, then I recommend this. And I was like, I'm not even there yet. I'm so still new at this. And so much has happened at once with this that because it's me deconstructing. And then it coincided with my dad getting really ill and dying, and trying to navigate that with my relationship with my mom, which is not good. My relationship with my younger brother, which he blocked me for a while, then unblocked me, and then blocked me again because my grandma died and then my dad died a year later. So it was just all over the place. And so I'm like, I haven't, and then the election. So I'm still like trying to figure that out. I don't know, honestly. I'm at the point where I don't think I'm opposed to the idea of there being a God. I don't think that we can possibly know for sure or know all the answers. And I think I'm happy for the moment to live in a place of uncertainty, because that just makes the most sense. Like I said, I'm very logical, and logically there's nothing that you can point to that says for sure this entity exists. So I just like want to be the best person I can be and help other people and raise good kids. And that's, I think I'm okay with living in uncertainty, but as I said, I'm still like at the beginning of all of this. So that could change. I don't know.
On that note, does the word atheism sound scary to you at this point?
No. Mm-mm. And I don't think it ever sounded scary to me. Again, when I first met my best friend and she said she was an atheist, and we're so close, we're like closer than, I don't have a sister, so she's like my sister at this point. When I first met her, I think I was like, oh, that's really weird. I don't know how to feel about this, but it was still never scary to me. I was just like, oh, I don't know. But I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to be a good Christian example to her. And I even remember in one of the very first years that we knew each other, having a conversation where she was talking about being an atheist, and her saying something about the idea of there being a God is like so like overwhelming and scary, and she just doesn't even want to think about it. And I was like, well, it sounds to me like you're more agnostic than atheist, but and so I was just like, oh, okay, so she's I'm going to be able to save her, so she's going to be okay. But now I don't think I was ever really scared of it, but now I'm just like, no, I mean, I might get to that point where I'm just like, yeah, I don't believe in a God. But the one thing I think about is like there's so many religions and so many similar stories throughout these religions. And I'm like, is it possible that there was only one religion to begin with, and they all at some point broke apart? Because I mean, how many churches did you go to growing up where this person was mad about this thing, so they left and started another church? I mean, isn't it plausible that it was just for one religion and there were fights and they broke apart and created like their own churches throughout the whole of history? I mean, it seems very likely, because I know too many stories about people just getting mad over stupid things. Yeah. And like it always makes me think of one of my Bible professors always used to say, build a bridge and get over it. And but people don't do that. So
yeah, that's a great point.
A possibility.
The archetypes issue comes in. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. I think I may be wrong in saying this, but have you ever heard of the name Acharya S? Her real name was Dorothy Murdoch, I believe, but she's passed now. But she, I believe, would have just been a little bit older than our age. But she was just an amazing student of ancient history and of just stuff that just blew my mind. And she studied the whole realm of astrotheology, which is where you say that a lot of the stories that you read in a book, in a holy book, they match like in an eerie sense, like too eerie, with stars that are, like that character. No. And then you'd eventually, she'd talk about how it's, woven into Christianity, where you would, for example, see Jesus saying, I want you disciples to go and look for the man carrying a water pitcher. He will show you the upper room. Now, well, that's Aquarius, that he's that guy. And or at least it's a possibility that they're looking at the star stories in some way. And you could talk about that for hours, but that does make me wonder if at some point, because there was no TV, 100,000 years ago, ancient humans, their TV was the stars. And for them, and of course there would have been like, shamans or, people that had authority in those tribes to interpret things and say, well, why did we have a plague or why did we have a drought? Well, because of this, that star just did that. And so you wonder if some of the archetypes are very early, and that's why some of them seem very similar, and why so many of them have a Virgin Mary, the name Mary, or some variation of that name. And it makes you think. I don't think we'll ever get some of those answers, but it's fun to worry about, to wonder about. With your journey, though, when you realized that you were truly deconstructing, I mean, truly almost deconverting at that point, did it shake you up in a sort of existential sense to think that maybe there is no afterlife and maybe that's a step too far? Or how did you deal with that whole concept?
No. I think that I had been doing it for so long without even realizing, and that's a lot of what my writing was, me just playing with beliefs and stuff as well, which it's funny, but so I think I've been doing it for so long that by the time I was able to just be like, okay, so the idea of heaven and hell, I don't necessarily believe in that. So I grew up with the literal idea of heaven, where my mom actually believes that she's going to have a physical mansion in heaven and the streets are lined with gold and we're just going to worship Jesus all day long. And I mean, I know I'm not the only one as a kid who thought that sounds so boring. So whenever my mom, even when I was all in Christian, whenever my mom would talk about, she just couldn't wait to go to heaven, be with Jesus, I was just like, can I please wait until I'm old? Because this here sounds so much more fun than that. And I never really focused on hell all that much because that was terrifying and it was already, so it was a relief to be like, okay, the idea of hell is relatively new and isn't even really biblical if, even if you're saying that the Bible is literal. And so that was just like, oh, thank God I can get rid of that. And, it was like such a relief. I have one friend from childhood who is also deconstructing, and that's something we were talking about recently. And she was like, I still, freak out sometimes, like that I'm so worried that I'm wrong and I'm going to go to hell. And I was like, oh, I don't have that problem anymore because I don't believe in hell. So that's, And so, I mean, I don't know what the afterlife is, but it really doesn't scare me one way or the other because I'm going to just not be anymore, or I'll be in heaven. So I don't believe in hell. So I don't know. I think it was a relief more than anything.
I know for me, I didn't deal with the fear of hell too much either. I'm sure it crossed my mind at some point, but the biggest thing that helped me, and people ask me all the time, I mean, I get this question probably at least once a week, if not more, and a lot more at the beginning of my channel. But people ask me, like, what do you do to get past these fears? And for me, the biggest thing that helped me was the study of comparative mythology. And when you realize that a lot of the stories that we're getting in the New Testament are heavily influenced from the fact that the Jewish people that were in exile were heavily exposed to Persian theology, which included Zoroastrianism, where they had this very elaborate afterlife, where you do get judged heavily and you do either get purged and you make it or you get basically burnt up. I think it was more of an annihilation concept, but like that. And then all of a sudden, the Jewish people that never had talked that much about an afterlife, all of a sudden they've got a whole expansive system going. And then you bring in the Greek stuff and literally like the words that they're using are like Tartarus and Gehenna and Hades. You're like, those are straight out of Greek mythology. Mm-hmm. And then you go back and read those stories. And of course, the big thing that I like to share that helped me was just literally seeing that the Gospels, especially in Acts, are heavily copying directly from the ancient Greek epics, such as Homer's Odyssey. You see stories in there. And eventually like, oh shit, you guys are just making this up. It's not like you're faulting them. You're not like, because I don't think a lot of them originally meant to create Christianity. They were just telling stories or maybe even writing plays. So it's not like they were necessarily bad people, but it obviously evolved and some people with power took over and made it that. But you realize like there's just no way. This stuff is truly copies of copies of copies of syncretized religion from several religions back. And eventually when you realize that, you're like, I am literally like pinning my life's happiness or fears over the worldview of ancient dead men from thousands of years ago. Like, why am I letting them dominate my life now? And eventually it's like, I guess I'm sick of this. This is not the right way to live.
Yeah, I'm to the point where I feel really bad for my mom because she was definitely the hardcore, like, die to self, like everything I'm supposed to do is about Jesus and so I'm like, what's the point of doing anything? And I feel like she's just destroying her own happiness. And I just feel bad because you're missing out on so much of life when you're like, well, there's no point in this life because one day I'm going to be in heaven and that's the real life. And like, no, but what about this one right here? There are so many more things you could be doing, and you can enrich your life so much by meeting other people and being open and loving and caring, and instead of putting yourself in a bubble of people who are thinking just like you and look just like you and hating everybody else.
Yeah. It's interesting that verse that Paul talks about. He says, if the resurrection of Christ isn't real, that we are of all people to be most pitied. And in cases like our loved ones that are still stuck in it, you just think, yeah, that's exactly the point. You're to be most pitied. And I really, really, I feel like one of the biggest, again, postmortems that comes from looking at our journey in Christianity is that we were pushed to believe that life was basically a big test. And obviously, there's different variations of, well, the test is, did you just have simple faith? Others it's, did you live a good life? Maybe in the more Catholic vein of it. But like, either way, it's just one big test. And like you said, the real life is up ahead. And if that's not true, if the real life is not up ahead, if this is it, and this is all it is, then you have literally wasted you've never lived a day of your life. What a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad. So.
Well, I'm just so glad that your kids are getting such a different perspective. That's the good news in this. That's the gospel, is your kids are able to redeem their time.
Me too. I so great. My kids all have friends with different backgrounds. They have gay friends, trans friends different races, and it's so nice. I grew up like all white, straight people. So, and that was one thing. Yeah, and I think. I remember that when I was younger, I always wanted my kids to have more of diversity, and it was because when my first job that I loved, I worked at a mall it's not around anymore, but nearby as a teenager, and at JCPenney, and it was the first time I met people with different backgrounds, and they were all older people because I was only 16, and they were all in their like 50s and 60s. And I worked with Black people and a Vietnamese woman who'd come from Vietnam. Her husband met her there when he was over there and married her and brought her home. And all these people who had such big, diverse backgrounds. And I was like, this is so amazing. I don't know anybody who has a different life than me, who had a different background than me. And so when I was thinking about, getting married and having kids, I was like, I want my kids to have, this diverse background. I want them to know people who are different. And because that was just a fun place to work. And so when my husband joined the Air Force, I was like, okay, well, this is the way to do it. And so they have, and my daughters do give me a hard time that I'm so woke now, but they love it. All of their friends follow me on Instagram and like all my posts. So, but I love that they have so many. They've had such a different experience growing up than I did.
Yeah, that diversity is so crucial, I love too how I think you've sort of alluded to this a couple of ways, but like when you really realize that they're different and we're implying through our theology and worldview that you're all wrong and you're doomed for hell, like the arrogance, but also the cruelty of that. I remember I had these really rich neighbors right across the street from us growing up, and they hired they were white and they were just spoke English, but they, for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason they hired this really little Vietnamese lady who I don't think she spoke more than like 5 words of English. I have no idea how they worked together, but she was the housekeeper and she made meals. But I remember, getting to see her enough to think she's just this sweet little old lady. And I knew from talking with them enough that she was a Buddhist. But I just thought, like, she's got to burn in hell, really? Like, she's got to burn in hell, this little old lady?
Yeah.
But it's the cruelty. And I go back to this a lot. When you think monstrous thoughts long enough, it turns you into a monster, because you eventually say not just, yes, unfortunately, she's going to burn in hell, but your theology leads you to say, but that's the justice of God, and I will applaud the justice of God. She has to burn in hell. Otherwise, God's glory gets reduced, because that means he's kind of wishy-washy about sin,
Yeah. I just recently, I think it was a podcast, I can't remember, but, and it might have just been a reel on Instagram or something. But I remember seeing somebody or hearing somebody say, like, if God really is all powerful, why did he have to send his son to die for your sins? Why couldn't he have just forgiven you? And I was like, I never even thought about it like that, because it was so ingrained in me that Jesus had to die for our sins. And I'm like, yeah, but that's true, because if God really is all powerful, then no, Jesus did not have to die for our sins. Because it's like, is your God all powerful or not? Which one is it?
And you realize you're the better person now, because you can just say the words, I forgive you, but God can't without blood. Like, why does he have to have magic blood to forgive? Yeah, it's amazing the ways that we see morality so differently. And honestly, I think for a lot of us, when you first get the glimpse and it takes your breath away a little bit, like, oh my goodness, he's a bit of a psychopath, isn't he? Like, once you see that, like, and if you let that go down Pandora's box, it's like that changes a lot. Yeah.
And the God that the Christian nationalists believe in is so different than what I was raised to believe in. And I think I keep saying to my husband that the only good thing Donald Trump has ever done is he's forced me to face all the things that I was avoiding facing because of him. This election, I was like, well, I have to reconcile all of these doubts and questions that I've had. I have to do it. It's, I can't keep avoiding it. And I feel so much lighter for doing it. I don't have all the shame and the guilt. I still am struggling with guilt with the situation with my mom, just because I am her daughter, and I feel guilty not being there, especially she's a widow. My dad's only been dead for 4 years soon. So I do feel guilty about that. I feel guilty because my older brother, I know, is the only one he's going to be the one who has to take on all this responsibility. But I don't feel bad about having boundaries and protecting myself emotionally and protecting my family. So but so my guilt now is nothing compared to what it was before. I felt guilty about everything before. And you hear people say, well, everybody who's deconstructing, they're just doing it just so they can sin, or, first of all, I don't really live any differently than I did before I started deconstructing. I just now don't feel guilty about it. I was always choosing to be myself anyway. I had some guilt in the beginning when I first started writing, because I had gasped sex in my books. Oh my God. And so I felt a little guilty about that, because I knew, that my mom was going to disapprove and other Christians were not going to approve. But I was like, hey, in real life, people have sex. Oh my gosh. That's why we're here. So, but I never really felt guilty about anything else. And the other thing that people say that we're deconstructing because it's just the easy way out. And I'm like, this is really hard. This is so, so difficult. It's so painful. I felt so alone. I didn't have anybody to talk to other than my husband. And he was like, can we just, we can talk about it, but does this have to be the only thing we talk about? I've luckily found some people in my little town other women who grew up. I joined a book club, and we're all liberal and progressive, and many of them came from religion as well. Like one used to be a Mormon, and so that's been really helpful that we've been able to help each other out. And I think, yeah, but I felt so lonely. It's not easy. It's hard. It's hard to admit everything you believed for decades was messed up, if not a lie. So it's not easy.
I remember a couple of years ago, there was a pastor, I forget his last name, but his first name was Matt. And he was talking to his church about saying that he was describing it as like deconversion or deconstruction is apparently like a sexy thing right now. And I remember a lot of people saying kind of along the lines that you're saying, like, this isn't sexy. This isn't fun. No. Number one, a lot of marriages have fallen apart. So people aren't having sex or having less sex. Number two, it's just, it's not fun. Like you really do lose a lot. And you lose your own worldview, you lose your own certainty, but also you lose friends and family around you. And yeah, do you feel like at this point you are reconnecting in terms of a new community in a sense of chosen family of sorts, or are you still at the cusp of that?
Yeah, I mean, we've already had that for a long time. Like I've mentioned my best friend many times. We met through the Air Force, so our kids are closer than cousins. So we spend we go on vacation with them, and they unfortunately they were living in Florida. They had to move because of DeSantis, and they have a trans child. So they live in Ann Arbor now. So we're very close to them. And so our daughters, when I met my best friend, she was pregnant with her oldest, and I got pregnant with my third shortly after. So our daughters are also best friends. And so thankfully, we keep saying that they've known each other since before they were born, but they go to homecoming together. And so they are our family, thankfully. But then my husband's younger brother and his wife, I guess neither one of them are MAGA. So, and they're not Christian either. So, but they live in Georgia. So yeah, so we don't have a huge community, but I'm trying to find people in my town to have that found family. I'm working on that. I've put myself out. I'm like you, I'm an introvert. So the first time I went just to a meetup, didn't know anybody. I was freaking out, but I'm trying. I have one neighbor who's not MAGA. So, it's difficult. It's really tough. It's really hard to make friends as an adult, especially when you work at home. So, yeah, but I'm trying, and I think it's getting better. But I have my husband, and if nothing else, and he's home all the time now. Thank you, government shutdown. So,
but it's true that it is hard to find people. I think we're certainly lucky in a sense that there's so many ways in terms of like social media to connect. But it's a mixed bag, because you're like, now all of my friends are online, and 99.9% of them aren't close by, and I'll probably never see them in real life, and yet they mean more. I mean, it's weird to think about. People that are perhaps halfway across the world mean more to you than the people right in your neighborhood or in your family.
Yeah, and
yet that's the way it works. I meant to go back to your story with your husband. Did you all sort of deconstruct close enough in time that there was never like I can't believe you just said that kind of moment, like, or did you all kind of just respect each other all the way?
I think that we were both doing it on our own without even knowing it. And so, no, we never had that moment where we were like, oh, I can't believe. I think we were both kind of afraid to bring it up for a while, just because I didn't want that to happen, but I also think that he would have listened to me. He's, like I said, he's very, very laid back. So he would have listened if I'd had a different opinion, and he would have considered it. I know for him, he was more just kind of going along with things. And then as I was doing research about things, I was talking to him about it, and he's so laid back that I don't know. But yeah, we have not had that problem where either one of us has said anything where the other one's like, oh, yeah, It's been okay. There have been times where he's like, I don't know, I'll have to look into it. And I'm like, okay, well, I can tell you where to look into it, but this is what I learned when I watched this documentary or read this book or whatever. And so he's also just very, very skeptical of anything that anyone sees on social media. And I'm like, I'm not just taking somebody's word at it. When I see something, if I have a reaction to it, I immediately look it up and look at multiple sources to make sure that it's real. I'm never going to share anything where it's, not, I haven't looked into it first, because I cannot stand that people just share things based on emotions without double checking. So, but yeah, we've been good.
That's awesome. I'm just so glad that happened, because that's such a game changer for people to have that safe space. And I remember saying to some people in my inner circle, family, loved ones, just saying something like, I'm learning some things and I'm not sure where this is going to take me, but I think it's going to probably keep me kind of in the same general realm of what I believe. But I also just want to put this out there, that I want to let the truth take me wherever it takes me. And probably it'll be the same place, but if it's different, I'm going to go where the truth leads. And it was like, what the hell are you talking about? You already have the truth. How can you change? You have the Bible, the Word of God. Like, what change could you possibly, where could the truth take you apart from the Bible and Christ and the cross? And yet it's just crazy. And it was like the most disrespectful thing I could have said to Christ and to the Bible. But in terms of, at this point, so it sounds like we're kind of in your story up to current day. How have all the circles of all these thoughts of what you used to believe, how have they evolved in terms of your healing? Because for so many of us, we're realizing that even though we've kind of chopped off the tree, even at ground level, like there's still so many deep roots and, the layers of the onion kind of stuff. What are the most important things that you've had to think through or do to heal? And what are some of the ways that you would recommend to other people to think through it as they heal? Because for a lot of us, it's so deep, and we're going to be doing this for a while.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, therapy, I don't know. And unfortunately, not everybody can afford it. And it's, that is one thing that should be available to everybody, because it is so important. And it was hard for me to take that step because, like I said, I grew up with a mom with mental illness. And so when I started having some anxiety and things, and I know now it was triggered by coming back here and coming back to Ohio and feeling, being surrounded by all of this again and feeling so guilty and realizing that my views had changed and didn't coincide with my family's anymore, which is something I hadn't really thought about before we moved back. And so it was hard for me to like give in and do therapy and stuff, because I was always like, well, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be in, have issues with depression, but ignoring it isn't going to fix it. So, and so when I did finally go online, and I'm doing online to look for a therapist, and I literally put in, that I was dealing with deconstruction and religious trauma, and that I didn't want anybody who would ever have voted for Trump. So I got matched, thankfully, with a really, really good therapist, and I was, working through all of that, but also working through like family issues, and not with just the religion, but with my son coming out and how that was affecting my, relationship with my mom. So yeah, that is for sure. I think the number one thing is therapy, but like I said, not everybody can afford it. So finding a good friend, somebody you can talk to who will listen. And I know that's really hard because I have a good friend, my best friend, and I can talk to her, but she doesn't really understand because she grew up Catholic and wasn't anything like this, like what how we grew up. And so she can listen, but she doesn't really fully understand. And so that's hard. But I think that just me listening to podcasts of other people who had deconstructed really helped. And reading books. And so for a while, not this past summer, but the summer before, that was pretty much all I was doing, was just listening to podcasts over and over again of other people who had deconstructed. So I think it helped me realize that I'm not alone, and also helped me think about things that I had never even thought about. Like, oh yeah, that was really messed up. Or, oh yeah, that is a weird belief, So yeah. So I think that you have to find a community somewhere. And even if the community is just like you in your head and a podcast. So something that's going to get you thinking and reflecting, and hopefully you have somebody to bounce it off of in real life. But I know that isn't always possible.
Yeah. I definitely love that we live, I mentioned social media before, but I love that we do live in an era when there's so many resources, even if it's looking at a YouTube video or something. But, I'm obviously doing YouTube, but other people before me did it. And do you know people like Seth Andrews and Matt Dillahunty? You know those names? Those are some of the guys that they've been involved in the atheist community online for a lot longer than I've been. But just hearing people talk about it, and once you realize that there are people saying basically like, no, you're not crazy. You're the sane one. The people that are staying in it are the crazy ones. And I love how you alluded to like the beliefs just seem crazy. I remember the day it hit me, like, my God wants men to cut off the end of their little boys' penises. It's like, that's crazy. And then you look at the Eucharist, the Lord's table, and you're like, so we're supposed to, like every Sunday or once a month, we're supposed to pretend to eat a dead man's body and pretend to drink a dead man's blood. Isn't that kind of akin to cannibalism? And aren't like Jewish people like completely opposed to cannibalism? And it's like, that's a little bit nutso, but like here we are, we're doing, crazy things.
Yeah.
And once you see it, you're like, wow. And it's crazy to me how so many of us grew up pointing the finger at cults. Like, those JWs, those Mormons are so weird. Look at their weird Bible and their weird beliefs. And they had polygamy at some point. Like, what are we talking about? Who this is obvious they're wrong. And then you step back and you're like, oh my gosh, just because my cult was much bigger and much more heavily accepted doesn't make it not a cult. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I was the sucker in the room, just like the Mormons.
And it was so shocking too, to start reflecting on some of the Bible stories that were just commonly told to kids, and realize how messed up what that was. And I kind of hit that point once. It was a long time ago. We still lived in Charleston, and my son was so young. I think he was maybe 7. And my parents were visiting, and my dad had brought either VeggieTales or Superbook. My dad was really into the Superbook DVDs, and he bought them for my kids like crazy. But it was the story of Daniel in the Lion's Den. And I'm pretty sure it was VeggieTales though. But in the VeggieTales, Daniel survives. The next day, the king throws in the other people. So they leave it at that because it's VeggieTales. It's still terrifying. And my dad made sure to point out to my son, well, in the Bible, they didn't just throw in those men. They threw in all their wives and children and the rest of their family too. And I was like, Dad, don't tell him that. And he was like, why? It's what the Bible said. And I was like, he's 7. You're going to give him nightmares. And even at the time, I was like, well, that's really messed up. But it wasn't until as I was deconstructing, and I'm like, there are so many stories that are messed up. Like, there's incest. I mean, there's multiple wives, rape. It's just so crazy.
Abraham and Isaac.
God telling Abraham to kill his son. I was like, this is a loving God, and this is something that no kid should hear these stories. So, it's normalized from such a young age that you don't think about how messed up it is until you take a step back. And then you're like, oh, that's horrible.
As I was reflecting too with my kids along that line, that they at one point had a Fisher-Price set of the Noah characters. And you think this is basically like a God who drowns his kids in the bathtub. Like what are we teaching these kids? Like, it's insane.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. It's crazy because you hear the story of Noah, and then the emphasis is like, but then God saved Noah and his family, and then the beautiful rainbow and everything. And like, forget about all those people who died. No, they don't matter. That's nuts.
Thus you have Gaza.
Yeah. We live about a little bit over an hour from the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. And so for years before my dad passed away, he was trying really hard to get all of us to go, just not just me and my husband and our kids, but both my brothers and their kids and spouse. And I hadn't started deconstructing yet, but I was still like, okay, I've taken a step back from this stuff. And so I was like, no, we are not going. And I didn't have words for it, but even now I'm looking at it and I'm realizing that I was like, no, you're not going to indoctrinate my kids. But I was like, no, we're not going. We're not going. And I kept saying no. So he would go over my head and try to talk my husband into it. And my husband's so laid back that he would just be like, yeah, we'll try to work it out. And I was like, we're not going. And he was like, I know, but I just don't want to tell him no. And I'm like, just tell him no, or tell him to talk to me. We're not going. And so, but he was just really, really wanted to take us all. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that. So, yeah.
It's amazing. I think sometimes the Christians have this idea that if you have just this experience or that experience, it'll just transform you. I had that so many times as a teenager. If you just go to this concert, if you hear the Newsboys this and Josh McDowell that, if you hear this preacher, it'll just change you so much. Like and you need, it's like you're constantly chasing these experiences, and God will use it. And I suspect some of that's in that realm with the Ark Encounter. I did have a couple, just a sort of a question for you that's sort of a goofy question, but I'm curious here as we sort of bring it to a wrap up. And after this, if you want to add anything that's on your mind from your story that we didn't get to, but you know how they say that sometimes what we write or what we create is in some ways autobiographical? Mm-hmm. When you look at your own life, and I know we've just touched on some of the high points, but looking at the whole thing, especially the deconversion included, is there any way in which what you write is autobiographical and related? And if so, how?
Yeah. I think through writing, I think I was starting to deconstruct even without even knowing it. First of all, I always write, I always have strong female characters, which is definitely not something you see in the church. So, I write a lot of dystopian where there's, a controlling group of people or government, and have people fighting against that. I also have, I don't plot. So my characters just come about organically. So there have been times when as I've written in characters over the years where, as it's a zombie apocalypse and they're like, oh, I'm now questioning whether there's a God because why would a God do this? And it wasn't anything, like I said, I don't plot. So it wasn't anything I did intentionally. I just create a character with a certain personality and then just let it go. And that seemed to happen a lot. But mainly it is just that strong female character, that character who's discovering herself, who's trying to figure out who she is in a world where, she's not supposed to. So it's definitely something that impacted my writing and the worlds that I created, and without me even realizing it. So,
like a way of taking your power back.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a group, like I said, highly patriarchal, and to the point where when I watched Shiny Happy People about the Duggars, I had no idea. I just thought I was watching a documentary about the Duggars, and then I was like, whoa. Some of this stuff was in my house, like the umbrella of protection and, the 7 Mountain Mandate and that we're in the Lord's Army and we have to like have as many Christian kids as possible. So I had no idea. I'd never really watched the Duggar Show. So I was like, what? Like this crazy family is similar to my family? That's nuts. Yeah. So, I mean, my mom never had any power in my parents' marriage. She wasn't allowed to make decisions. So to the point when my dad passed away, she actually called me to ask if she should get her hair cut because my dad would never let her get her hair cut. So, yeah. So I think that was definitely, I mean, I started writing dystopian around the time that the Hunger Games was really popular. So it was, reasonable to have that strong female character just like that. But I continued that with all of my books because I guess it's me.
That's awesome. I love any stories where we're talking about taking our power back and our voice back.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's such a crazy cool thing too, to realize that for a lot of it, it's just getting the language. And, it's like we didn't have the vocabulary to describe what we were thinking and feeling. But once you start to move in that direction and get the vocabulary and get your voice back, it's just a runaway train. And you're obviously, with 66 books, you're definitely got your voice back. So that's so cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story today. I'll definitely have the link beneath our video for your people to go buy your books. Was there anything else about your story, or just any other thoughts that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. It's been great to hear your story. And I'm just, again, very jealous of your prolificness with the writing. Hopefully I'll figure out a way to get into writing some books myself at some point. Again, not Christian books, but following your footsteps. But I'll just wrap up by saying we've been speaking with Kate Mary. Kate, thank you again so much. Great to get to know you. Great to hear your story. And let's do it again sometime. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.